Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something, well, quite counterintuitive, I think. This idea that sometimes the biggest win, the real success, is actually hidden inside what looks like, well, like failure.
It's a huge mental shift, isn't it? We tend to think victory means obvious power winning the battle right now.
Exactly. Domination.
But the material we're diving into today, from a really key moment in Islamic history, it just forces us to look at it completely differently, through a divine lens, you could say.
Yeah.
Strategic, long-term.
Absolutely. And our focus is Surah Al-Fath, the victory. It's the 48th chapter of the Quran. Now, the context here is crucial. It was revealed around 628 CE, just as the Prophet Muhammad and his companions were returning to Medina.
And returning from what? From an expedition that, honestly, to almost everyone there, felt like a complete disaster. A humiliation, even.
Right. A real setback.
The background is fascinating. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he'd had this divine vision, you see. He saw himself performing the lesser pilgrimage, the Umrah, in Makkah.
And he shared this vision.
Oh, yes, explicitly. So about 1,400 companions set out with him, totally committed. Their intention was purely peaceful pilgrimage. Nothing more.
And they made that clear, didn't they, the way they traveled?
Absolutely crystal clear. They wore the ihram, the simple pilgrim cloth, symbolizes humility, shedding status. They brought 70 animals for sacrifice, showing they intended to complete the ritual. And critically, only sheathed swords, the kind any traveler might carry for basic protection. It was an undeniable signal, we come in peace.
But the leaders in Makkah, the Quraysh, they weren't having it.
No, they'd been the persecutors for years, and they just couldn't stand the idea of the Muslims walking into Makkah, basically as equals. It was pure pride, what the Quran calls hamiyya al-jahiliyyah, the arrogance of ignorance, that sort of fierce tribal bigotry.
So they blocked them, physically.
They did. At a place called Hudaybiyyah, just outside Makkah, this led to really tense negotiations.
And this is where the paradox kicks in. The result was the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah. But the terms, they looked terrible for the Muslims, didn't they?
Brutally one-sided on the surface. They were denied entry to Makkah that year, flat out. Their whole journey seemingly pointless.
And the conditions they had to accept.
Things like having to return any Muslim who fled Makkah seeking refuge in Medina. But the Quraysh didn't have to return anyone who fled Medina. It seemed deeply unjust.
I can only imagine how the companions felt.
Devastated isn't strong enough. Degraded. They started questioning things. You have figures like Umar ibn al-Khattab, known for his strength and clarity, going straight to the Prophet and asking these really pointed questions.
Like what?
Like, aren't we on the truth and they on falsehood? Then why should we let our religion be degraded like this? It shows the depth of their confusion. Not doubt in God, maybe, but just, how could this be the plan?
Wow. Okay, so into that atmosphere, that feeling of defeat.
Exactly. That's when Surah Al-Fath descends. And the very first verse isn't about consolation or better left next time. It's this immediate, powerful declaration, Inna fatana lakatan mubina. Indeed, we have granted you a clear triumph, a clear victory. Right then, right there.
Incredible. So our mission today really is to unpack that. How could this apparent failure be called a clear victory? What does this divine reframing teach you about how to measure success?
Right. Let's jump straight into that opening. Inna fatana lakafadhan mubina.
Indeed, we have granted you a clear triumph. Fath mubin.
Clear, manifest victory. This is where, like you said, the human view just gets completely flipped on its head.
It does. And what's amazing is the consensus among scholars, going right back to the companions who lived through it, they all agree this Fath mubin, this clear victory, it wasn't the later conquest of Makkah.
No, which most people would assume was the victory.
Exactly. But no, the consensus is clear. The Fath mubin mentioned here is the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah itself, that very peace accord that felt so humiliating.
Wow. There's a quote you mentioned from a companion, Al-Bara ibn Azib. Yes, it perfectly captures it. He said something like, "You all consider the conquest of Makkah the victory, but we considered the truce of Hudaybiyyah the real victory."
So Makkah was the result, but Hudaybiyyah was the cause, the seed.
Precisely. Makkah was the fruit, Hudaybiyyah planted the seed. So the question becomes, how? If it looked like a loss, what made it a victory in divine strategic terms?
Let's break that down. What were the actual gains from this treaty? Politically, maybe?
Okay, first, massive gain. Political recognition. Think about it. For almost 2 decades, the Quraysh treated the Muslims as rebels, outcasts.
Right, denying their legitimacy entirely.
But by sitting down, negotiating, and signing a formal treaty as equals, the Quraysh were forced, implicitly and explicitly, to recognize the Islamic State in Medina as a legitimate power, a sovereign entity.
That's huge. It changes their standing across Arabia.
Instantly. Every other tribe watching now sees Medina not as a band of rebels, but as a recognized political force. That legitimacy, far more valuable in the long run than winning a small battle.
Okay, so political recognition. What else?
Second, and maybe even more important, opportunity for dawah, spreading the message of Islam.
How did the treaty help with that?
Well, think about it. Years of fighting, tension, hostility. It creates barriers, fear, mistrust. People couldn't just interact freely.
True.
The treaty established a 10-year truce. Hostility ceased. Suddenly, people could travel between Makkah and Medina. They could meet, talk, debate, observe the Muslim community up close without fear.
And the removal of that fear, that aggression, was key.
Absolutely. The Quraysh strategy had always been suppression through force.
Right.
But once that stopped, the actual message of Islam, its moral strength, its logic, it could spread organically.
And did it.
The results are just,
Hmm.
well, astounding. Historical sources are clear. In the 2 years after the treaty, more people converted to Islam than in the entire 19 years before it combined.
19 years. Wow. That's staggering proof of the treaty's wisdom.
Isn't it? Peace turned out to be the most powerful weapon for spreading the faith. Way more effective than conflict.
Okay, so recognition, dawah, any other strategic angle?
Yes. Thirdly, it was a vital strategic precursor. It essentially neutralized Makkah as an immediate military threat.
How so?
By signing the peace, Makkah sort of tied its own hands for a bit. This gave the Muslims breathing room. They could consolidate their position in Medina, deal with other threats like the one at Khaybar we'll discuss, and build their strength. It set the stage perfectly for the eventual, almost bloodless return to Makkah 2 years later. It shifted the strategic balance completely.
So the treaty wasn't appeasement, it was strategic repositioning.
Exactly. And the Prophet's own perspective confirms this divine valuation. He said about this surah, Surah Al-Fath, that it was more beloved to me than everything over which the sun rises.
More valuable than anything in the world.
Because it contained this divine affirmation, this wisdom, knowing you're aligned with God's plan, even when it looks like a failure to everyone else. That's the ultimate prize.
Which leads perfectly into the next couple of verses, verses 2 and 3. The victory was granted so that certain divine honors could follow.
Right. It wasn't just about politics, it was about spiritual elevation, too. The first honor mentioned is the forgiveness of shortcomings.
Now, that sounds tricky. The prophet is considered infallible in conveying the message.
Right. So scholars are careful here. The term used, then, isn't typically understood as sin in the conventional sense for a prophet. It's often interpreted as khilaf al-ala actions that might be permissible, but perhaps less than absolutely ideal given his incredibly high station, or maybe perceived shortcomings in the eyes of others during difficult decisions.
Okay, so minor things magnified by his status.
Sort of. And the idea is that the immense good that resulted from this treaty, the huge influx of converts, the establishment of Islam was so vast that it essentially overshadowed or effaced any such minor points. The ultimate success validated the path taken.
Like a tidal wave of good washing away tiny imperfections.
A good analogy. And crucially, this forgiveness, this divine favor, didn't breed complacency. It inspired even deeper gratitude. Remember the famous story? When asked why he prayed so much, standing until his feet swelled.
Should I not be a thankful servant?
Exactly. Divine blessings demand greater devotion, not less.
And the other honors mentioned. Completion of favor.
That points to Islam becoming firmly established, moving from a persecuted minority to a secure, sovereign community, able to implement its principles fully.
And guidance to a straight path. He was already guided.
True. So here, it likely means Allah paving the strategic path forward, showing the way to navigate complex political realities, like the treaty, to achieve the ultimate goals. It's about divine strategy unfolding.
And finally, mighty help. Nasran Azizan.
Yes, and notice the type of help. It wasn't necessarily battlefield victory here. It was this incredible, almost paradoxical victory achieved through peace, a treaty that disarmed the enemy psychologically and politically, leading to Islam's rapid expansion. That's mighty help, achieved through wisdom, not just force.
Okay, so we've seen the external victory, the strategic brilliance, but now the surah shifts focus, doesn't it? It looks inward.
It really does. It becomes this fascinating analysis of how the same event, the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah, acted like a spiritual sorting mechanism.
How so?
It revealed the true inner state of different groups. The same pressure produced vastly different reactions based entirely on what was in their hearts.
Let's start with the believers, the companions who held firm. What did they receive? Verse 4 mentions as sakina.
Ah, sakina. Such a crucial concept. It's often translated as tranquility or serenity, but it's deeper than just being calm.
What is it then?
It's a specific kind of divine reassurance, a profound sense of peace and stability sent down directly into the heart by God, especially during times of turmoil, fear, or confusion.
And it certainly needed that at Hudaybiyyah.
Desperately. Imagine the scene. They felt humiliated, angry, confused. Some were ready to challenge the prophet's decision. The historical accounts mention a moment of near chaos right after the treaty was signed.
What happened?
The prophet commanded them, okay, slaughter your animals, shave your heads. The Umrah is off for this year. But initially, they just froze. They were so stunned, so emotionally wrecked, they hesitated to obey.
That sounds serious.
It was. It was the sakina settling into their hearts, combined with their fundamental loyalty, that allowed them to overcome that emotional reaction and finally comply. It gave them the discipline to follow through despite the apparent humiliation.
And the verse says this sakina was sent for a specific reason.
Yes, so that they may increase even more in their faith. Liyazdaru imanan ma imanahim.
So faith isn't static, it grows.
Exactly. This verse is a key proof text for that idea in Islamic theology. Faith, iman, isn't something you just have or don't have. It fluctuates. It can increase and potentially decrease. And trials like Hudaybiyyah, when met with patience and trust, are precisely the moments that increase faith. They forge it, strengthen it.
Okay, so that's the believers, strengthened by the trial. But what about the others, the doubters? Verses 5 to 7 talk about the hypocrites, munafiqun, and polytheists, mushrikun.
Right. The same event that brought sakina and increased faith for the believers brought, essentially, condemnation and punishment for the doubters.
And why the difference? What was their fundamental error?
The Surah pinpoints it precisely. Their evil thoughts of Allah. Zan as-sa.
Evil thoughts. Meaning what exactly?
Meaning they had a cynical, materialistic view. They looked at the situation, the powerful Quraysh, the seemingly weak Muslims, the humiliating treaty terms, and they calculated that God had abandoned his messenger. They thought the Muslims were walking into a trap, that they'd be wiped out.
So it wasn't a lack of military understanding, but a lack of trust in God's power and promise.
Exactly. It was a fundamental failure of tawakkul, trust in God. They projected their own materialistic calculations onto the divine plan.
And the consequence.
The Surah describes this chilling boomerang effect. The ill fate they expected for the Muslims would actually encircle them. Their negative prediction becomes their reality.
That's quite profound. Your perception of God during a trial determines your outcome.
It really does. Are you thinking God has a plan even if I don't see it? Or are you thinking this is hopeless, God isn't powerful enough? That internal stance is everything.
And the surah reinforces God's power directly here, doesn't it?
Repeatedly. To Allah alone belong the forces of the heavens and the earth. It's a stark reminder. Allah didn't need the Muslims to fight or even to succeed in their initial plan. He controls everything. He involved them in this trial for their purification, their growth, to distinguish the sincere from the hypocritical. Victory and defeat are his tools.
Okay, so we've gone from the external event to the internal state. Now the surah seems to connect that internal state to external actions specifically. Loyalty to the prophet and the sacredness of the covenant made.
Yes, verses 8 to 10 really lay out the relationship. First, they define the prophet's role very clearly, which explains why loyalty to him is so crucial.
It gives us three-part description in verses 8 and 9. What are those roles?
First, he's a witness, shahid. This has a dual meaning. He's a witness to the truth in this life, embodying the message, and he'll be a witness over humanity in the next life, testifying that the message was delivered.
Okay. And second?
A bearer of good tidings. Mubashir. He's there to inspire hope, to tell people about the rewards of faith and good deeds. Motivation.
And third?
A warner, not here. This isn't about being scary, it's a mercy. Warning people about the consequences of disbelief and wrongdoing so they can choose a better path. It's comprehensive guidance.
Witness, bringer of good news, warner.
Yeah.
So the expected response from people is?
Belief, obviously, but more than just passive belief, active support, honoring the messenger, and constantly glorifying Allah. It's a whole package.
And this leads into the really significant historical moment mentioned in verse 10, the pledge.
Ah.
Bay'at al-Ridwan.
Ah, yes, the Pledge of Pleasure. This was an extraordinary event that happened right there at Hudaybiyyah, under a tree.
What triggered it?
There was a rumor, false, as it turned out that the Prophet's envoy to Makkah, Uthman ibn Affan, had been murdered by the Quraysh.
Wow. In that tense situation, that must have been explosive.
Absolutely. In response, the Prophet called the companions together, and one by one they came forward and placed their hand in his, pledging to fight the Quraysh to the death, if need be, to avenge Uthman.
So this wasn't just a political agreement. It was a pledge of life and death rooted in faith.
Totally. It was a profound act of commitment under extreme duress. And the way the Quran describes Allah's response is just stunning.
What is 6?
Verse 10 says, Allah's hand is over theirs.
Metaphorically, of course.
Yes, scholars are clear. It's metaphorical. It signifies Allah's presence, his acceptance, his pleasure, Ridwan, hence the name Pledge of Pleasure, and his ratification of their pledge. It was as if they were making a direct covenant not just with the Prophet, but with God himself.
That elevates the pledge to the highest possible level.
It does, and the verse immediately draws the consequence. Accountability.
What's the principle?
Whoever breaks their pledge, it will only be to their own loss, and whoever fulfills their pledge to Allah, he will grant them a great reward. It's simple. Fidelity benefits you. Breaking your word only harms yourself. The divine project moves on regardless.
So, after highlighting the incredible loyalty of those who took the pledge, the surah then contrasts them sharply with another group, the ones who didn't show up when things got tough.
Exactly. It turns its focus to some of the Bedouins, the nomadic Arabs from the surrounding desert areas. Some had initially joined the expedition, probably hoping for an easy trip or maybe some spoils if things went well.
But their commitment was shallow.
Very shallow. Rooted in convenience, maybe tribal connections, but not deep conviction. When the situation at Hudaybiyyah looked dangerous, like a real confrontation might happen, they bailed. They stayed behind.
Okay, so verses 11 and 12 dissect their behavior. They come back to Medina later, and they have an excuse ready.
Oh, yeah. A classic excuse. They say, oh, we were preoccupied with our wealth and our families. Please, ask Allah to forgive us. Trying to sound pious and concerned, hoping for an easy way out.
Just wanting the Prophet to smooth things over for them.
Right. But the Quran immediately calls them out. They say with their tongues what is not in their hearts. It exposes the lie.
So what was in their hearts? What was the real reason they stayed behind?
It goes back to that same core problem we discussed earlier. Zanis saw the evil thought about Allah. Verse 12 reveals their true calculation. They genuinely believed the Muslims were marching to their doom.
They thought the expedition was suicidal.
Yes. They thought Muhammad and his companions will never return to their families again. They looked at the odds, the small Muslim group versus the powerful Quraysh, and made a purely materialistic bet. They chose self-preservation over obedience to God and his messenger.
And how seriously is that lack of trust viewed?
It's viewed incredibly seriously. Verse 13 basically equates this active distrust, this assumption of failure, with disbelief, kufr. Because if you believe the enemy is more powerful than God's plan, you fundamentally misunderstood who is in control.
That's a harsh judgment.
It is. But what's remarkable, again, is the path offered. It's not just condemnation and finish. There's a chance for redemption.
A second chance. How?
This is a fascinating insight into leadership and rehabilitation, really. Verse 16 lays it out. The Prophet is told to tell these Bedouins, essentially, okay, you failed this test, but you'll get another chance. You will be called to face a people of great military might.
A future, genuinely difficult battle.
Exactly. Probably referring to campaigns against other strong, hostile tribes later on. The message is, if you obey then, when it's truly hard and requires real sacrifice, then you will earn a good reward.
So words aren't enough. Repentance has to be proven through action. Risking something real.
Precisely. You have to demonstrate the loyalty you lacked the first time by stepping up when it counts, even more so the next time.
But the Surah also makes a distinction, right? Between those making excuses and those genuinely unable.
Absolutely. Verse 17 provides this crucial clarification, this mercy clause. It states clearly, there is no blame on the blind, nor any blame on the lame, nor is there any blame on the sick.
So if you have a legitimate reason, a genuine incapacity,
then you are completely excused. Allah judges based on capacity and intent. He holds the hypocrites accountable for their choices, but he shows complete compassion for those who are genuinely unable to participate. It underscores the perfect justice of the divine assessment. He never asks more than someone can truly bear.
Okay, let's circle back now to the loyal companions, the ones who made that pledge under the tree, the Bayat al-Ridwan. Their sincerity wasn't just noted, it was rewarded. And not just in the hereafter, right?
No, the rewards were immediate and tangible too. Verse 18 gives us the sequence. It starts with Allah's pleasure. Indeed, Allah was pleased with the believers when they pledged allegiance to you. He knew what was in their hearts.
That internal sincerity, the ikhlas, was the key.
That was the trigger. And because of that sincerity, Allah sent down 3 things, mentioned in verses 18 and 19. First, sakina, that divine tranquility we talked about. Second, a near victory, fathan kariba. And third, abundant spoils, magana makathira.
Okay, sakina we understand. What about the near victory? What does that refer to?
The overwhelming consensus among scholars is that this near victory points directly to the conquest of Khaybar.
Khaybar, the wealthy Jewish oasis town north of Medina.
Exactly. And significantly, the campaign against Khaybar happened almost immediately after the Muslims returned from Hudaybiyyah. It was the very next major event.
Why was Khaybar so important at that moment?
2 main reasons. Politically, Khaybar had been hostile, undermining the Muslims, but perhaps more importantly, economically. The community in Medina was facing real financial hardship. Khaybar was known for its fertile land, especially its date palm groves.
So the abundant spoils were literal.
Very literal. The wealth gained from Khaybar provided significant, much-needed economic relief and security for the Muslim community. It was the tangible, worldly reward promised, flowing directly from their spiritual commitment at Hudaybiyyah. The peace treaty created the strategic space to deal with Khaybar.
Wow. So the sequence is clear. Sincerity, divine pleasure, sakina, near victory, material reward.
Beautifully put. Now, maybe the most profound part of this whole section, arguably the whole surah, comes in verses 25 and 26. It explains why Allah prevented the Muslims from fighting in Makkah at Hudaybiyyah, even though they were ready after the pledge.
Right, they were fired up, ready to avenge Uthman. Why hold them back?
This is where divine knowledge just transcends human understanding. Allah reveals a specific reason He restrained their hands. It was because there were, within Makkah itself, believing men and believing women whom you did not know.
Secret Muslims. Inside Makkah.
Yes. People who had embraced Islam but were concealing their faith due to fear of persecution from the Quraysh. If the Muslims had attacked Makkah then,
they would have ended up killing fellow Muslims without even realizing it.
Exactly. They would have unwittingly harmed their own brothers and sisters in faith. Imagine the guilt, the tragedy, the internal strife that would have caused later.
So Allah prevented a potential catastrophe that the Muslims themselves couldn't even foresee.
It's a stunning example of divine wisdom prioritizing the unseen, protecting innocent lives, even hidden ones, over immediate military objectives or revenge. Human strategy sees enemies, divine strategy sees souls.
And verse 26 then contrasts the motivations of the two sides, doesn't it?
A stark contrast. The disbelievers were driven by Hamiyya al-Jahiliyyah, that arrogant bigotry, that pride. We saw it in their refusal to even allow the title Messenger of Allah on the treaty. Petty, prideful stubbornness. While the believers, guided by the sakina Allah sent down, were made to adhere to the kalimat al-taqwa, the word of piety, of God consciousness.
And what did that piety look like in practice here?
It looked like self-restraint, patience, honoring the covenant even when it was painful and humiliating, choosing the long-term divine strategy over short-term emotional reactions.
It really highlights how the treaty itself, those terms, it seems so bad, actually worked out brilliantly in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. Let's take that clause about returning fugitives like Abu Jandal. It seemed incredibly unjust.
Heartbreaking, returning him in chains.
It was. But look what happened. Another escapee, Abu Basir, was also supposed to be returned. He escaped his Quraysh escorts, but knew he couldn't go to Medina because of the treaty. So what did he do?
What?
He, along with Abu Jandal and other escapees who couldn't go to Medina, set up their own independent base on the Quraysh's main trade route to Syria.
Oh, for the Quraysh. They started raiding Quraysh caravans. They became this major thorn in Makkah's side, disrupting their economy.
So the clause designed to hurt the Muslims ended up hurting the Quraysh instead. Precisely. It got so bad that the Quraysh themselves came to Medina and begged the Prophet to cancel that clause and please take all the fugitives into Medina just to stop the raiding.
That's incredible. The Prophet's patience and adherence to the treaty terms completely turned the tables.
It proves Hudaybiyyah was the real victory, strategically speaking. It unleashed forces the Quraysh never anticipated.
So the final verses of the surah bring everything together. Verse 27 circles back to the very beginning, doesn't it? Back to that vision the prophet had.
Yes, it confirms it explicitly. Indeed, Allah will fulfill his messenger's vision in truth. You will surely enter the sacred mosque if Allah wills in safety.
So the vision was true all along. The distress the companions felt was because it didn't happen immediately.
Exactly. It was about timing, not truth. The lesson here is profound patience. The vision was fulfilled perfectly the very next year. They performed the Umrah exactly as described, in safety, with heads shaved and hair shortened, not fearing. Allah's promises are certain, his timing is perfect.
Then verse 28 seems to zoom out, giving the ultimate purpose of the entire mission.
It does. It states that Allah sent his messenger with guidance and the religion of truth, Islam specifically, to make it prevail over all other ways of life.
That sounds quite definitive.
It provides the Muslim community, the Ummah, with this long-term vision, this sense of inevitable, divinely ordained success. No matter the temporary setbacks, the ultimate trajectory is towards the ascendancy of truth. It's a powerful source of resilience.
And then the very last verse.
Yeah.
Verse 29. It's fascinating. It doesn't end with an event, but with a description. A description of the people.
Yes, it's the ultimate definition of what the victory actually produced. It's a portrait of the successful community, the model believers. And it starts by directly addressing the Quraysh's earlier objection. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. What they tried to erase from paper, Allah immortalized in scripture.
So what are the key characteristics of this victorious community described here?
It paints this beautiful picture. First, balance. Severe against disbelievers, merciful among themselves. Firmness on principles when dealing with outright opposition, but incredible compassion, unity, and mutual support within the community. Not harsh zealots, not weak compromisers, principled strength combined with internal mercy.
Okay. What else?
Second, their core devotion. You see them bowing and prostrating Siyas Presa, seeking Allah's bounty and pleasure. Their life revolves around worship, driven by a sincere desire to please God, not just seeking worldly things.
And there's a mention of a mark.
Yes. Third, the mark. Their mark is on their faces from the trace of prostration. This isn't necessarily a physical mark, though some interpret it that way. More deeply, it's the light, the serenity, the humility that shines on the face of someone truly devoted, someone whose forehead touches the ground regularly in submission to the Creator. It's an inner state manifesting externally.
And the surah ends with that powerful parable.
The parable of the seed. It compares the Muslim community to a seed that is planted. It sprouts, grows strong, thickens, and stands firm on its stalk. This growth delights the sower, representing the believers, and infuriates the disbelievers.
It's a perfect summary of your journey, from vulnerable beginnings to strength.
Exactly. It shows that the real victory, the true Fath, wasn't just Hudaybiyyah or even Makkah. It was the successful cultivation of this community, sincere, patient, balanced, devoted. The events were just the means. The community was the goal. #OutTRO.
Wow. So this deep dive into Surah Al-Fath really does turn our normal ideas about success upside down. It shows that true victory, from a divine perspective, isn't always about the immediate win or looking strong. It's about, well, strategic patience, isn't it? Spiritual integrity.
That's the heart of it. The victory wasn't winning a battle, it was winning the peace in a way that unlocked incredible long-term growth.
And that treaty, Hudaybiyyah, is the prime example.
It teaches us that internal sincerity, ikhlas, and having that good, unwavering opinion of Allah, tawakkul. Trust, those are the things that attract sakina, that divine calm and stability.
And when you have that internal alignment.
Then, even if things look humiliating or disadvantageous on the surface, that inner state is what ultimately leads to enduring success, to real triumph. The outer circumstances eventually reflect the inner reality.
So maybe the provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away today is this. If you apply this lesson of Fath Mubin, this idea of a clear victory hidden in apparent failure, where in your own life right now might you be facing something that feels like a setback, a loss, even a humiliation? But could it actually be the seed, the strategic starting point planted by divine wisdom for your next major long-term victory?